All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. We're gonna call to order. We do have a quorum this evening. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Williams, will you lead us? Yep. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? All right. That'll bring us to reports.
Yeah, tonight we're pleased to bring our operations program evaluation presented by Mr. Gary Getz, Director of Operations. So, thank you, Mr. Getz.
Good evening, everyone. Been a good year start for us. We're strong in everywhere but our custodial field, and we're working hard with HR to try to add numbers, see what we can do creatively. We've had a number of staff within the district that are paras, bus drivers, secretaries that are come to our department and they work 2 or 3 hours a night helping clean buildings. So as a district-wide, we're really becoming a team to help keep the district to the level we need it. Probably one of the biggest highlights I'd like to point out in our accomplishments, the Missouri School Plant Managers Association has a certification program that's supported by DESE and the MSBA. I was one of the first graduates of the program in 2013. This year we have one of our employees that has completed the course and is graduating herself, and it's Ashley Carver. She is a night building lead at the high school. Josh Ellison, our maintenance supervisor, will be completing the course this April and will be graduating next spring. So it's a continued course. It's about a 3-year program that covers everything from managing all the way up through facilities and building within the operations world. And that's to have people continue to show interest and go through that program is a huge accomplishment, and we're very proud of that. Some of the big goals for the next few years to push, obviously, the one big thing we're looking at is the energy. Working with Dr. Gooch and some of the programs out there to try to do what we can to help save energy for the district. They're just going to continually go up. We're currently in the middle of putting a whole new control system in for HVAC. We are replacing all of our lights with LED in the classrooms. That is currently going on as we're talking, which will be a huge bonus for the district as well. For myself, I'm going hopefully be here for about 3 more years with Dr. Welly, and this makes my 27th year in this industry, and for the last 14 years been with Green Valley and been absolutely ecstatic to be here. It's an awesome district. Have grown so much since I've been here in this role, and the district has taught me so much, just couldn't fathom being where I'm at. So at this time, anybody have any questions? I'd entertain any questions.
So I was reading through your report and was interested in that FMX software. Mm-hmm. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. We used to have what was called School Dude Works. It's a computerized data work order system. The FMX is a system that every building has part of. They introduce work orders. That's how we receive our PMs, our monthly PMs that we get. The FMX, when School Dude was going under, they weren't staying up with technology. FMX was chosen out of 3 other programs to go to. The big thing about it is the calendar. The district now has one calendar that everything's on. Anybody in the program can go out and see anything going on in any school. If the high school has something as far as play, band, debate, anything going on, it's on the FMX calendar, and my team can see it and we can plan for it. Sporting events, anybody that has anything going on, we do a lot with the St. Louis University, and it's on the program, so, and all the other administrators can see it as well, so they can see what's in the district as well.
All right. Anybody else have any questions?
Seems like across the board we've had challenges with staffing. Just seems like the season we're in our society, but feels like you guys have had it the hardest. It seems like it's hit you guys the hardest.
It's been rough. Yeah.
And it seems like also it's been a lot of turnover, even when you do get someone you have for a short time and then out. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit and what the challenges are with that?
Yeah, and kind of like you alluded to, industry standard right now, it's everywhere. We just had our state conference and all districts. I sat and I spent a lot of time with Lee Summit, Independence, Blue Springs this last weekend, and it's pretty much across the board. Finding help, first of all, retaining help, it's kind of different. I don't know, it's a younger generation. It's a different mindset, and trying to learn to work to that to help foster that into a long-term career. We've just started to kind of close the gap again. We've had a couple more hires come to us. Golden egg answer, I really don't have. I really don't know.
You feel like I mean, are most of the people that, if they are leaving, are they leaving? Are they stepping up to another job, or are we losing them for some other? I mean, getting a higher paid job, or are they crossing over to other districts?
They were, and to the applaud of the board and the district with what we've done with salaries for the non-certified this year, that has really stopped with us. Before that, I would be absolutely able to say yes because of salaries. We had people leaving the district. We do not now. Matter of fact, we're starting to draw in because of that. We just pulled 2 from Oak Grove School District a couple months ago. So we're starting to be that influence on some of the districts around us and bringing back to us. We had 2 young gentlemen that worked for us for a year and a half. They had a plan. They raised enough money, put in their 2 weeks' notice. They're going to go to New Zealand and walk across New Zealand for a year. I wished them the best, send me pictures, but that was their plan. They were great workers, awesome employees, showed up every day, did their job, but they got to their point, and this was their goal, and that's what they're doing. So, like I said, it's a little different for me, get up, come to work, do your job. And to see this from the younger generation, they have a goal, they work to that point, and now we've reached that point. So trying to figure those little nuances out and how to work around that, it's been a challenge, absolutely challenge. So.
Well, you feel like, though, that we're on the backside of that, and we should be able to start filling some of these holes.
I really do. I really do. We're starting to see applications come in. I don't know if the environment around us is driving that. You watch the news and some of the layoffs and the shutdowns, and maybe we're seeing some of that. I know we had one gentleman from Yellow Freight come to us and apply. So he said, even if they do go something, I don't know that I want to go back. He's got a few years left till he can retire, and he puts in 6 years with us. He gets school retirement if he has anything left. So, yeah, slowly starting to see it come back to us.
I'm in Snibar Elementary weekly, and so I know the challenges. I see, definitely when we were down, I saw that we were struggling there. We always try to do our best to help where we could with that.
Wonderful.
But I know it's been a challenge for you in getting, and I'm hoping that is going to start changing. I do have to say real quick, you got an incredible employee in Gary Payne, who has been helping us for years, open up for us for the church, and he's incredible. And so I just want
Gary
to mention
steps up
him.
a lot for us. He really does.
I appreciate him.
Yeah.
I hope we don't
I will relay that to him
lose
directly.
So,
yes, I will relay that to him directly. Thank you.
Quick question for you. You have, I believe, 47 employees, are those full-time employees?
Yes. Yes.
Do you think if you were to break that up and have part-time positions for some of those custodial roles, would that help?
We're working on that, Mr. English, and that's kind of alluded to earlier. We have some district staff currently that's working for us a few extra hours a night. We have some outside, we have some retired personnel. Mr. Mike Fegans is one. He comes in, he works 3.5 hours every night helping with trash. We have a gentleman that came out of our Work to 21 program out of the high school, is at Prairie Branch, and he helps pull trash every night, does 3 hours. So we're looking at different avenues, not the traditional, I need somebody for 8 hours to do this job. Right now at North, we have 2 gentlemen that are working part-time. One pulls trash, one cleans bathrooms. So I'm getting about 7 hours a night combined out of the 2, so we're starting to kind of come back on top. So yeah, non-traditional ways of looking at it is where we're at. We're trying to get outside the box, outside the window, and say, what's it take? Not what we're used to, but what's it take and how do we need to get there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our goal.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Getz, we have a large red 3-ring binder up here. Could you give us just a quick overview on what we're
Sure.
sitting on up here?
Absolutely, absolutely. The EOM, Emergency Operations Manual. When I came to the district 14 years ago, Dr. Roy Moss and Dr. Snow came to me and said, we are behind the times in emergency management. My background coming from that, along with Chief Eddie, we sat down at that time and we kind of went through the district. The state Safe Schools had a plan out there. It was kind of a generic plan that you could pull off of, add to, so we pulled it down. We worked with Glenn Berry and Dr. Berry, and I can't think of the other gentleman's name, from the Safe Schools, putting it together, helping us kind of build that. It is outdated, there's no doubt, but I know Dr. Gooch is working strenuously to get that updated and get a company in here, and we're working to get to where we need to be. In that binder, it's a district-wide binder, and it covers every school in the district. And basically within that, there's basic procedures from intruder to tornado to fire, everything's in there. What a school district or a building needs to know in the event of emergency, a very basic plan to keep things moving forward. At the building level, each building has their own EOM manual, and within that, there's a command flow chart. If you're familiar with the incident command system, the ICS system, we module off of that. Every district has a commander, every building has a commander. Dr. Welly, you are the commander for this district, so if it is a Joplin size event, to kind of put everybody can understand, you know, everything goes to the top commander, because every building has to run through that. There's a communication command chart. Every building activates a communication officer, which then communicates, and all of that is in the manual. So in an event of a disaster and something major scale happening, they can stop, get their manual open, and they don't have to critical think. It's right there for them. And then once they read it, then from there, they put their thinking in to play and what they need to do for their building. The Missouri Safe Schools Act, when it came around, was awesome, but it's went so far, and there's so many things. I can personally tell you all, going from building to building in the state of Missouri and doing different districts, I can't thank you all enough for what you do for this district. If you ever get time to go to some of the outer districts, and when I say outer districts, I mean the smaller districts, the Santa Fe School District in Alma, Missouri, 500 kids, K-12, roughly. They don't even have a doorbell at the front door. You walk in, walk through the commons, and go to the office. No security whatsoever. They don't have a single camera in either of their buildings. Wellington, Missouri, you go over there, same thing. I went over there, walked straight into the cafeteria during lunch. The gentleman that's on the fire department over there, I know, hey, Gary, what are you doing here? Well, I got something for the office. Oh, yeah, just going down the hallway. No name badge, nothing. So to see what's going on out there with some of the smaller districts and the struggling in the budget, and for you all to be committed to the protection of the students in this district is phenomenal. Because I see things that just absolutely make me cry over the way districts don't respect what can happen. And here, it's the forefront. We make sure we have the security issues. We make sure we have what we need to handle it. You know, And every time we have something, Dr. Gooch is the first one, make sure you get what we need for security on this bond, make sure it's there. And so as a district, we are doing far above and beyond what most districts even get to see, so I applaud you for that. Yeah.
So, and to that last statement, I saw that we just were awarded the safety grant also for some fencing and some different things.
Yes, Dr. Gooch applied and went for it, and we got $250. Yeah, we got $250,000 of the grant money. And right away, we've already got our district safety camera guy, Dave Fegans, on it. The big goal is to make sure all elementaries' internal hallways are covered, which we've had that plan for several years. It's just been getting the budget for it. Fencing is going to improve in the district, and hopefully there's enough money that we can update some radios in the buildings when it's all said and done. We'll see. It's not cheap. But yes, the safety grant's going to go a long way for the district.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Thank you.
All right. Y'all have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is the student enrollment trends between all the different schools and the student growth. Dr. Willie?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is the time of year that we like to look at our trends. This primarily helps us plan what needs to happen next in terms of facilities. So we're going to start out with elementary. Our elementary enrollment for all 4 schools combined remains flat overall. We have 1,883 students in grades K through 5 across the school district. And this is down 37 students from a year ago. And if you look at table 2 there, you see the line graph. You can see there are ups and downs in the last few years. We've remained relatively flat for the last 12 years or so. Enrollment at Prairie Branch continues to exceed its pre-2019 boundary adjustment level, but is at a 3-year low. So Prairie Branch is what we've been watching really closely. Overall, we're at 81% capacity in grades K through 5 with growth remaining flat. Now, the capacity numbers that we use in this year's report, we're concerned that they need to be updated, and so in part that's the reason why we have set a priority for this year through our annual priorities with our CSIP to work with our architects to do an assessment of all of our needs pre-K through 12th grade on our facilities. And one of the main things with that is because elementary is a perfect example, because if you look at that line graph, that line graph doesn't tell the story that we need more space at the elementary level. It looks like we're hanging on okay there. But behind the scenes, programs are growing, and the real estate that these programs need is growing, and so our capacities are shrinking. So we believe that one of the results of that inventory, that assessment that we do, is that red line is going to come down. Because our elementary capacity, every time you take a classroom and you change it from regular education to special education, for example, at the elementary level, the capacity goes down 24 students in that building. So we want to take a comprehensive look at all of our schools, but we start with elementary because it's the closest that we have to hitting capacity. All right, I'm going to jump ahead to page 3, and certainly we'll come back and answer any questions on any of this, but I want to hit each of the grade spans just a little bit. Middle school enrollment is certainly slowing. We have 1,054 students in grades 6 through 8, which is a decrease of 36 students from a year ago. And if you see that bar graph, you can see that we combine North, which is shown in in blue, and South Middle School, which is shown in red. So if you just track the tops of those two combined, you can see the overall growth in grades 6 through 8 across the district. So you can see for the last 5 years, it's been relatively flat, maybe even trending downward a little bit. And then it's a little trickier to compare, but you can see if you just look at the blue, you can see blue is trending up. North Middle School is trending up. South Middle School is trending down slightly. and they are probably as close now as they have ever been in terms of student enrollments as you compare the two. Because of the significant addition we did at North Middle School in recent years, it's probably the one time that if you just look at classrooms, it's the one time we overbuilt by just a few classrooms, but we did that intentionally at that time because we moved, if you remember, our technology department uses the equivalent of 2 full-size classrooms at North Middle School for technology. So there will come a time where we need more middle school space. One of the first moves we'll do is find a new home for our technology department, and then North Middle School will have some built-in room to grow. And then I want to jump to the high school. This is on page 4. Our high school enrollment is finally leveling off with 1,463 students as of Monday. This is 2 fewer high school students than a year ago. And we have shown, however, year-over-year increases at the high school in 10 of the past 12 years. This continues to be where our growth is at the high school. It's, you know, this is the first year where we've really had a sizable decrease in enrollment, with overall coming down about 75 students from where we were a year ago. There is one component of that we can account for, and that is a change in the way that Missouri does virtual education. So one new provision this year over last year is if we have a student that's enrolled in a Missouri virtual school, they are no longer our student, and that's new. Up until last year, those students would still be our students. They would just be attending courses through the virtual program. So that probably accounts for roughly 1/3 of the decline from a year ago. Our instructional, staying with the high school here a little bit, the instructional capacity of the high school we determined to be 1,560. It's represented by the yellow line on the graph. And the instructional capacity is 80% of the full capacity. And full capacity would be 1,950. And for anyone that's associated with the high school that's wondering how there could be 400 students difference between those two lines, that would be if every classroom had 24 students every hour. And we have been in that situation. I mean, probably 10 years ago, when we were way over capacity at the high school, we had lots of teachers on carts. So we've really benefited a great deal at the high school from the investments that have been made in the infrastructure there over the last 10 years. But there could come a time. I don't have a forecast of when high school number 2 would even be a conversation topic, but in the years before when you're approaching the need for a second high school, you don't want to continue to build out and keep up with your growth only to peel off 1/3 of your high school kids or 1/2 of your high school kids, and then you have twice as much school as what you need. So there will be a point in our distant future as a community where we could learn to live between the yellow and the red as we approach the red, and then you build a second high school or you do some other accommodation that gets you back down below the yellow again. Now, we still have work to do at the high school. We are about 10 years in on our long-range plan there. We're in phase 6. We're doing, as you know, the gymnasium and the weight room and some other spaces. Most of what we've done over the past 10 years has been to build around the outside of the high school. There's still a lot of renovation work in the central part of the high school. And when we get to those phases, we will be adding classrooms to what is now the northwest corner. There's a staff parking lot out there, and we'll kind of enclose that northwest corner of the school. And the classrooms we put there will allow us some capacity growth, but will also allow us some replacement of classrooms that would come when we clear out we have to continue to clear out the major thoroughfare through the middle of the school so that bodies can move through the middle of the school a little easier. So it just kind of tells you a little bit where we're at on the high school. Then as we move on to page 5, the K-12 enrollment, as I said, we are at 4,400 students this week, down 75 students compared to a year ago. And that puts us, if you look at the table 8, which is our most recent demographic study, which was done about 5 years ago, we were trending. We had projections of low, medium, and high, the purple being the low end. Well, 4,400 students puts us well below the low end of the projected growth. So, you know, what does that mean? Well, that means we get to breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief that we haven't had to keep up with a higher growth trend. But our community still has high potential for growth, and so this could change. We could start to see indicators in a year that we start to get closer to the low end, or we start to get closer to the medium end on the growth. It doesn't take much growth in our community for us to feel the pain of trying to keep up with that growth. So we actually don't mind it tapering off a little bit. It's allowing us to get caught up with our long-range plan at the high school, and it's allowing us to envision maybe stepping away from the next phase at the high school and maybe taking on another project somewhere in the district. And the board at their last meeting authorized a community-wide survey that'll get started next week. We thought maybe it'd get started this week, but it's gonna begin a week from now, and there will be phone surveys to random residents, taxpayers within the school district, and then we will also communicate out a link. And the third-party contractor is managing all of the surveys. So we won't receive any of the surveys. We're only going to get a summary of the results, but we'll help promote the survey with all of our community patrons. And people who participate in that survey, they'll see that we're looking at, you know, the perceptions of the community. Do they think that we're ready for another elementary school? Do they think that we're ready for additional early childhood space? And there's other projects on there as well. So our overall recommendations are to initiate the assessment of facilities and develop a new pre-K to 12 long-range facilities plan using our architects and consistent with this year's CSIP priority, and then analyze current needs at our schools and commit resources as needed to help each school respond to the needs of their students. And I've recently met with the administration at both Matthews and Prairie Branch about accommodations that are underway this year and what next year could look like. Everybody always wants to know, are you going to have to do a boundary adjustment? And it would be my recommendation at this point that we do not need a boundary adjustment at this time for next school year, but the results of the inventory that we do in the assessment pre-K through 12th grade, it could be that a boundary adjustment in the near future is part of that equation. But I don't feel that there's an urgency to do it at this time for next school year. So that's one thing that we can put off at this time. I would entertain any questions.
All right, anybody have any questions for Dr. Welly? So I was just looking at table 8. So from the demographer, it looks like that 4,400 students, I mean, that looks like where he had us back in 2018-19 level. Looks like
Yes, that is correct.
we're a long ways from, I mean, I know what you're saying. It doesn't take much to get to that point, but
Right.
yeah, I think
He would have, yeah, and he would have projected on here that by now we would have been even 200 students more.
Higher than that.
Yeah. I don't remember what year that study was. It must have been prior to 2018, 2019. It maybe was the year before.
Okay. Very good, thank you. Next item, we'll move on to new business, which is the Belcher Scholarship nominee named, we have to have one named by November 15th.
Yes, much sooner. This is through MSBA, and our deadline is much sooner than before. And I've met with the high school team, and I think behind the scenes, I think we can recruit finalists for this. School districts, so our board competes with other boards. We put our nominee forward, and then within the region, a regional winner is chosen. And then at the state level, there's a statewide winner, and there's quite a bit of scholarship money available. So it's highly competitive. So we like to track the qualities of those who make those different stages, and then what we do is our counselors approach those students who might be good candidates as finalists, and then we try to get as many applicants to the board as we can. I mean, there have been years where there's only been one applicant, but we like to get at least 2 to 4 for you to evaluate and pick who you feel like has got the best shot at moving on and advancing regionally and at the state level. So for tonight, we don't have any names for you, but we're going to need to bring you names much sooner than before. And so what I thought is if we knew that there was 1, 2, or 3 board members who would like to evaluate those applications as they come in, and then at either the next time we meet, one of the next 2 times we meet, then this committee, the subcommittee, would bring a recommendation and why, and then it would give a chance for the rest of the board to vote on your finalists.
Okay,
I'd be willing to be part of that committee.
all right. Do we have any other volunteers?
Excellent.
And since Eddie's not here, do we want to volunteer him?
I will write his name down, and we'll certainly follow up with him.
Sounds like a good plan.
Great, thanks.
That's how it works. Thank you.
All right. So the next item on our agenda is board policies. We'll start with IIAC, Instructional Media Centers.
Yes, so this policy we're bringing back with some proposed changes. The board last saw this, I believe it was in June, and at the time, one of the possible courses of action was to give our librarians an opportunity to have some collaboration time, maybe make some recommendations. And so the proposed changes you see to this policy come from 2 places. They come from the collaborative work of our librarians, but they also come from the administration. A lot of this language that's in green is actually previously existed as a separate regulation. And we don't deal with regulations too much. There's only 1 or 2 regulations, period, in policy. And so we pitched to MSBA that we would like to pull all of it together under policy. That way it's just a little bit more clearly under the purview of the board. And MSBA said that that was perfectly appropriate. And so that's what you're seeing is a combination of those 2 sources. We've also proposed changes to corresponding administrative procedure language regarding public questions, comments, or concerns regarding library resources. And although the board doesn't vote on those, I figured you would want to be able to put eyes on those as a point of reference. So although it's really the first read with the revisions, a lot of times on the first read, we just kind of move on to the next thing. But I really, if you've had a chance to, any of the board members who have had a chance to preview the changes, we certainly would welcome any of your initial reactions to what we have here.
All right. Anybody have anything they want to add tonight?
Could you or your staff just kind of give a brief, I think, overview of maybe some of the processes over the last 3 or 4 months that have kind of been going on just with the librarian staff and things like that?
Like their collaboration?
Yeah, just kind of how materials are selected, why they're selected, just kind of a bird's eye view.
Well, my understanding of the timeline of the selection process is that that's an ongoing process, and what's reflected in policy language and in the proposed policy language does capture the types of things that they take into consideration. One of the things that we've learned a little bit more about from the librarians as a follow-up discussion to June is their review of existing materials, and so we've certainly learned a little bit more about that, and I can explain that a little bit. At least the outcome of it, the librarians review their collection, and they review for much the same reasons as what they select in the first place, and those the objectives, the new objectives are listed here, 1 through 7 on the second page. And then when they reconsider, they're mostly looking at, in addition to those criteria, they want to make sure that if it's nonfiction material, that it isn't outdated or factually incorrect. Maybe the resource no longer supports the curriculum, because curriculum evolves, and so the resources that used to be really relevant to support the curriculum maybe nobody's checking those out anymore because they no longer are supported within the curriculum objectives. Maybe the resource has not been checked out for several years, it's no longer carries the recommendation of the librarians or the administration. So what's been reported back to me anecdotally is literally hundreds of titles have been purged for any of these reasons, and some titles have been determined to be maybe better placed in another level. So we have some middle school titles that have been shared with the high school for evaluation to see if they can maybe be more suitable for to the high school. I mean, before we, if it's in good shape, if it's still relevant, but maybe there's reasons why it isn't relevant at the middle school anymore, then the librarians will collaborate and will share resources. And so sometimes the books do get moved around between grade spans.
I have a suggestion you might want to consider for the procedure. I think under number 1, it says that the complaints, and then it goes on and says that basically the complaint could come written or verbal. I'm not sure that that's necessarily fair to the administrator. I think that it should probably be written. And the reason I say that is I could see Dr. Carroll, for example, at a volleyball game and say, hey, I have a problem with this book. Is it really fair for him to,
Right.
you know, it's his personal time, or I catch him in Price Chopper or something, that's his personal
Right.
time. I really think it's good to get a time stamp on that
Yeah.
complaint, and so I'd suggest maybe making that a written, I guess, complaint, for lack of a better term.
So the way I interpret this particular provision is, if a staff member hears that that a patron has a concern about a book, we want them to pass that on to the administration to look into. Ultimately, though, if somebody's going to file a formal complaint, it must be in writing. But sometimes there's just questions, and if there are questions, then sometimes that is more verbal. And if the parent gets their questions answered but not to their satisfaction, they might say, you know, I'm still not satisfied with this. Then yes, then it certainly becomes more formal.
In the policy or the procedure, is there any time frame expressed, like that it has to be reviewed within 30 days? I don't recall seeing anything, but I could be wrong.
No, I don't recall a time frame.
That may be another suggestion, just so we've got and that, again, supports making it a written. I think that time starts when there's a written complaint,
Yeah.
not when I catch Dr. Carroll at Price Chopper.
Yeah, I think, does anybody have a suggestion on what would be a reasonable time frame? I mean, is 30 days a reasonable time frame? I guess it
I'm
depends on the
not-
work. I mean,
Yeah, I'm
there-
not qualified to
Okay.
answer that one.
I'll pitch that back to my team.
Yeah, with the amount of people involved in a review, I think we need those people involved in the review to look at the time frame, because then you don't want to get stuck on Christmas break or something like that, and then we elapse time or something in that manner. So I think having an expectation of time is reasonable. I'm not sure what that time frame would be with the amount of people that are involved in that process.
Yeah, and it might even be a few fold. It might be, here's a time period during normal, periods, and if there's a break, if there's a scheduled off time for school, that it gets extended to another period.
Yeah, I don't intend for it to be a gotcha type
Yeah.
of thing. It's really just to,
Well, maybe
Some sort
maybe
of-
there's an expectation that when the complaint is received and acknowledged, that the person who files it can expect a response that includes a projected time frame at that time.
I just want to say, based off of other local school districts who are experiencing this, it has been a long and drawn-out process. And so to put 30 days on it, that may not be possible. And so I think I agree that looking at who is available for that committee, how long is the book going to take to read, when are we going to be able to pull these teachers, how are we going to pay them? All these things come into a factor of how this is going to look when we're going to review. And so I think that's important for us to know that 30 days is most likely not going to be a doable stance for our staff.
Fair.
So, something that I had noticed was in the policy itself, under objectives for the selection of library materials, number one, taking into consideration the age, I feel is very broad, and can leave a lot of discretion. And what I gathered from the early June workshop was that we were trying to close the broadness of some of this. So we might look at changing that to maybe a grade range, K through 8, or for different materials. We might look at how we're gonna specify age.
Thank you.
I have a question for it. How is age different than grade level? Because we could always associate age with the grade level that they would be in. So I guess I want clarification
Thanks. So
on why that's still vague.
I actually think that maybe we need to add quite a bit more to some of the policy or procedure one, as far as what materials are available for certain grade levels, whether sexually explicit materials are totally out of the grades K through 8, not available until high school, or we need to set some parameters for that.
And how is saying emotionally developmental, socially developmental, varied interest and ability of the students, because it's not directly talking about sexually explicit stuff, like,
Right.
why
And
that doesn't, because I will say in my mind that covers those things, because when you look at what's developmentally appropriate for those ages, then those things is what also comes into question. So
but that can also be left up to the discretion of whoever's picking that material. Right?
yeah,
It's a tough, yeah.
without being too, like, because also there's the risk of being too specific, right? That nails people down to a certain thing when there's a lot of guidelines, like, I don't know, that's hard. And there's no way we would ever cover everything in any policy ever, right? Of any situation that's ever gonna come up. So, yeah, I'm just not sure how to rectify that, I guess, is maybe my question.
Yeah, and
Or what
I've
the
had some thoughts
solution
on
is.
it over the last, couple months, trying to wrap my head around the best way to go about it. I was just waiting until we got some, input back from the administration and see what they were able to come up with. But I think probably either in our policy or in our procedures, we're probably going to have to actually put some definitions of what we deem, sexually explicit material. And then,
And who is and I think that's tough too, because who is the we in that? Because the we, I don't think you mean.
we are the board.
Well, but the we should come from our standards and state guidelines as to what those definitions are, because that's
Well,
where that's.
and I-
State
defined.
law as well, what our state law states.
Well,
Yeah.
but I disagree with that one a little bit.
Okay,
We do not have to, like, for instance, the 573.550 from the Missouri revised statutes, we're tied to that, but that doesn't mean that is the only thing that we have to be tied to. We can have our standard higher than that as far as what explicit sexual material is. We don't have to just do that.
correct. And here's where all this continues to be tough, is you saying we can have our standard higher than that can also be seen as we can be more restrictive than that. So then we're restricting access to certain individuals.
Well,
Access to what type of materials?
Right, that's
Just
what I'm
in
trying to
general?
say, like, as
Gotcha.
you try to nitpick each part of that, it just, like, I don't know, where does the reach stop? I don't know. I don't think we're disagreeing per se. I think we're just trying to nail those things out, right?
Right, I think from my standpoint, what I would like to see is a more black and white line instead of a gray line that, depending on years down the road, boards down the road, administration down the road, librarians down the road, there's always going to be a roadmap for what way to go, and that it doesn't just go with the whims of, Dr. Welly tells the librarians and his staff that this is what we want in our libraries now, and that's verbal. But once we're all gone, the next superintendent, the next librarians say, okay, well, we want something different in our libraries. So I think I'm just trying to have something a little more concrete.
I think, I think without some of these specific guidelines, I think that Jeff's getting at, here we are. I hope and I assume some of you have seen, I think, some of the content that we're referring to, some of the a little over-the-top content, maybe in its current placement. And I think that's what's coming into question. State law, the legal description of sexually explicit content is different than the legal definition of pornography, is different than the legal definition of sexual content. But at the end of the day, I think all of those things tie so closely in that I think it's just about helping, protect the students, maybe, unless I'm seeing that wrong.
So I will say that I have seen that list, and there are very few middle school books on it. I want to say there's maybe two handfuls of middle school books that are listed. Almost all of those are high school books. There are no elementary book listed. And so then it looks at, as a whole, if you're talking about what we have seen and where it is placed, that placement is focused on high school. And I have read all those books. I have made comments on your document about, what those things mean and what it means in context for the entire book, not just taking out a very simple piece and then drawing a conclusion about what the meaning of that book is. So my question for you both is that if we're not seeing any issues in the elementary school, we're seeing very few issues in the middle school, then what's going on in the high school, other than the fact that our librarians are following policy laid down to them by their organizations as well? They're not just going out and picking these books for fun. They're actually going out and they're using the information that is given them to abide by, to make the best decisions that are for our students, to abide by the social development, varied interest, and ability levels of the students served.
Yeah, I think a lot of this, and by the way, I appreciate any of the staff or librarians that have been involved in the daunting task of maybe inheriting a room full of thousands of books. If you need help, let me know. But Dr. Taylor, you are correct. The majority of them, I believe, were in the high school. I think that bringing it to light, and I will go back to the June workshop where it was just, I continue to ask the question, what does this type of content benefit the children or young adults in our district? I believe that freshman, sophomore, junior, senior probably have the ability to maybe discern a little better than elementary and middle school. And it's a very fine line to have the freedom to read and to learn. But I think the common sense part of it, I would venture to say that most people in the community, if I were to read the books aloud, which I'm not, because that's not my goal here, but if I were to read just those few pages, 6 pages, 10 pages, whatever, out of a 300 or 400 page book, might make it a little uneasy for people. It's just not normal language. If a staff member has a 30-minute conversation with another staff member and 2 of those sentences use those types of words, those types of content, it changes the outcome of that conversation. I got my daughter's at North Middle School and loves it, absolutely loves it there. and got an email that, you know, YouTube, I think they were kind of setting some parameters on YouTube, which is great, you know? It's age appropriate, content comes in, it's an accident, we get it out, we protect the students, and we move on with the education. And so for me, it's trying to understand, I think, the justification for this type of content that I think very few people will actually come out and stand up against the content. And I don't know if that's for fear of being ridiculed, but I've come to know each and every one of you on the board, and I really think that if you're reading that content, I don't think you would be able to say, yes, this is appropriate for, I'll say, middle schoolers, you know, elementary. And Dr. Taylor, again, you are correct on that. A lot of those, I say a lot of the books on that list, and again, that's just my little list I put together. There might be more. There's probably not less than that list. But I just want to be sure that we're doing everything we can for our kids, that we are supporting our librarians, supporting our staff in this. Yeah, I'll open it back up.
I would just like to say one more thing about your list, is that if you're going to refer to that list as a whole, ensuring that you know, for instance, one of the passages highlighted that is offensive and should be removed is from Beloved by Toni Morrison, that basically just talks about the history of slavery. And that's 8 pages, and that's the piece that was pulled out of that book. Not saying that there aren't other pieces in that book, but to see that history is trying to be removed from a book for that one piece of content, I think that if you're going to look at that list and refer to that list, that we definitely need to look what's on that list, and what is things that are historical fact that we cannot take back, that our students absolutely need to know about, as opposed to removing it from a library.
Yeah, and I 110% agree with you. That list, I think, was a discussion, you know, just to start a discussion. Is it appropriate? Well, yeah. Is it not? Maybe not. So yeah, that's certainly a dark time in history, and I do agree that everybody needs to learn about that, the good and the bad, the ugly. I didn't write the books, I just put together a list. What would you say about some of the other content in the other books on the list?
I think this is tough because
No,
the
it is.
goal
It
of
is.
the workshop and the goal of our agenda and the goal of this conversation is to look at policy. And I feel like we're all getting a little sidetracked and maybe a little bit more into specific things. I think we could all talk multiple hours like we did in June about this topic. However, I would love if we could focus it a little bit more on direct policy and maybe not on specific works or specific pieces, so that then we can review the policy, see where any issues or concerns lie of to what that policy is, and then we use the policy and we put it in place. Because I'm also not sure how many books are challenged or reviewed in a school year, how many of our parents are seeking these types of things, how many conflicts we have. So for us to spend a ton of time deliberating where we're at on those pieces, I think what we really need to focus on is the policy, where we're at with the policy, what changes we would want to see or suggest, and really, that way we can be productive, right? That's my thought, because
Would
we all
you
have ideas, so.
Are you saying you would support some of the specific wording of the sexual content? Is that what you're saying, or no?
I'm saying with the way the policy is, I don't have a problem with the policy, because when you look at, in an educational setting, we're constantly looking at age appropriateness. So like in anything that I do, is it age appropriate that this is happening? Is it age appropriate? So that's a standard and a factor that we constantly work with. So age is similar to grade. So when you look at those things and you say these developmental pieces, it encompasses all of those things. So if you want specific things labeled, I think that's hard, because then there's things we could leave out and leave a loophole in other ways. But if we can come back down and say, this is emotionally inappropriate for this age of a child, then we can say our policy supports those things. I think it's hard if we try to define too many terms Because then that, if we're too, and there is value in black and white, I get that too, but sometimes if we're too determined on one single thing, then we can get around it, right? Like if we, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm following you. I really am.
Yeah.
I think without some of the specifics, this is how we got to where we are, I think is my viewpoint.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that by coupling this procedure, this particular procedure with this policy, it just kind of shows that the issue is complicated enough that there is no policy language that's going to do everything that we need it to do, and that's why the procedure is so important, so that if we've missed something, if there's a book that doesn't meet community standards, there's a process for it to be reviewed and ultimately would be reviewed by the board, and the board would have the final say on that title. So that would be the time that the board would all have a copy of the book, you'd read the book, and you would ultimately decide on the appeal whether or not that book is appropriately placed. So I do think that's important. The discussion that we've had so far on this has been really helpful. I've taken notes. I'm sure my team members are taking notes. You know, it raises some questions for me about some other things that we can dive into and maybe come back with some further revisions for next time for consideration. You know, my goal is to get us to consensus. My goal is to get us to a policy that, quite honestly, can pass muster by the board. You know, I love a 7-0 vote on policy, and I think that might be a high bar in this case, but I'm going to work really hard to bring a policy that pleases the board. So I would, we've talked about a couple sections of the policy. Are there any other aspects of the policy that anybody has questions about or
Yes.
has views on?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is more nuts and bolts, completely different angle. The confidentiality component, it does an excellent job really identifying this as a record that's protected by federal law. I'm curious, and this is probably also a state law component, what is the record retention on a library record? So when a child graduates, does that then fall off at that point? Is that,
I can look into
we have a transcript and it's got their grades and GPA, but I don't think that we need to necessarily retain what they read
Right.
when they were in high school. Does that, you know, when my kid's in elementary school, both of them, when they get out of elementary school, does that part of their
Right.
record get deleted? I'm just kind of curious how that works, and I want to make sure that we do
Yep.
have some sort of schedule
We,
in
we
place.
can, we can track down both what the state tells us on that and what our current practice is, and I
That'd
can
be great.
report back.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have anything on?
I just wanted to say for just the reference, historical reference for Green Valley, for the number 1 on KLB AP1, we've only had 2 books that have been requested to be looked at in 17 years, and none of them were ever removed, just so that we can see the historical reference of our district as well.
Okay. Anybody else?
Are those official reviews? Is that what you mean by that? Official reviews or official complaints or whatever the wording
One
is?
of them was official written, the other one was verbal.
Okay. That's not bad.
Is to, well, it's really just to bring food service non-discrimination statements into compliance with federal programs. So it makes it consistent with how we handle discrimination or our anti-discrimination view for all other federal programs. And so those two have that in common. For policy BBF, school board member ethics, that's a full rewrite just to, that's initiated by DESE and MSBA in order to get the policy language on board member ethics a lot more aligned to our new MSIP 6, which is the most up-to-date criteria for evaluating school districts. So I've read through both the new ethics and the old ethics, and I mean, there are some things that are uniquely different, but it's really just a new flavor to say, you know, the board is going to act in an ethical way. So We don't usually talk about them on the first read, but all three of these are pretty straightforward. And we've looked at them. We're okay with the way that they are. It's not going to be an action item tonight, but if the board has had a chance to look at those and they have any questions at all, we'd be happy to talk through those.
Yeah, I've looked through them. I didn't see anything out of whack with any of the three of them. Does anybody have any comments or questions for tonight?
We'll bring those back next time too.
All right. With that, that brings us to the end of our agenda, where we will look.
I move we meet in executive session. Section 610.022, subsections 3 and 13.
Okay. All in favor, or do we need a roll call?
Roll call. Yes.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Yes. All right. We will be meeting in executive session. Thank you, everybody, for coming out.